Hello everyone, this is Mr. Meter and we are here again with another video on a brief explanation on data transmission over DLMS Cosem protocol. We will be covering GET, SET, and ACTION requests in DLMS Cosem. Okay, let's talk about the basics of the DLMS Cosem structure. I'm sure you all know about it, but let's have a quick look. On the left side, we have the main hierarchy tree of all that exists in DLMS Cosem. Every object and attribute has to abide by this rule. We have class ID, which is the main category for all objects in the DLMS. And under that, it actually defines which category objects go into. For example, the voltage or current, which get updated by every second or a part of a second, all go under register category, which is class 3. Or a clock object always goes under class 8, or profile generic objects for like load profile 1, 2, blah, blah, or events logs all go under profile generic class, which is 7. The next one is OBI's code or logical name. This is the next level, which actually defines the address for each object. Each object meaning, for example, the voltage, the clock itself, or the load profile 1, or limiter, or many other objects. For example, for clock is 00100 255. As you can see, it's very like to IP version 6 and considered it has been derived from that directly historically. But after that, each of these objects have their own attributes. For example, a clock object must have a time zone. So and also it must have a value for the time itself and how the time works. Does it abide by the daylight saving? All these attributes for a clock go under attributes and go from 1 to whatever attribute ID it has. The attribute ID of 1 always is the logical name, is the OBI's code itself. Or logical name itself, the value of the logical name. And the second one, the 2, value 2, attribute 2, let us say, most of the time is the value of that of OBI's code, but in many other objects, this can vary. For example, in clock, it can be the time and date, or for example in load profile it can be the buffer, and it can vary from object to object. And most of the objects in one class ID abide by the same rule, but this isn't always the same, and do not put this as a strict rule. Okay, the next one is the access selector. The access selector is when you just want to, for example, get data from that attribute, and the data can have different types of buffers to go back. For example, in load profiles, if you want to select the buffer, for example, you want to have the data of the last day in the load profile 1, or the whole profile data. This differs. If you use the access selector of 0, it returns the whole data of the buffer. But if you send, for example, 1 as the access selector, it returns directly the last day. And many other objects, they do not have this access selector. For example, you don't have access selector for instantaneous voltage or clock, because it has no meaning on that. And it kind of gets used when it's necessary, actually. The method ID and method parameters are used when your object has a method that you can execute or call. For example, in Clark, you can just set, for example, it has a method to set to quarter. For example, if the clock is, for example, I don't know, 1640, if you call the set to quarter, the clock will go down 1647. Will be set to that, the quarter of the hour, the closest quarter. In many objects, many other methods are used and called, and they differ from object to object, and they vary a lot. Okay, now let's delve deeper into the get, set, and action requests. The main thing about all these request types is that they come with the request and response, meaning that you have a request and the meter or the server responds to you with the value you wanted or with the result you wanted. So, and this is the basics of connection-oriented services in telecommunications. Okay. The purpose of GET request and the response of it is that we want to have the value of a certain attribute of a certain object in a certain class ID. For example, we want to have the time zone value of the clock. Okay. So we will have to send the structure you see to the meter. The invoke ID and priority just defines what type of GET request we have. There are different types of GET, SET, and action requests, which you can find in the Green Book, and it's fully detailed. The next one is the class ID. For example, if we want to have the time of the meter, we will have to send the class ID of 8. OBI's code is the address of the object, and you said before, but in the structure you want to make ready, you have to send the hex format, the logical name, not the OBI's code. And the next one is the attribute ID, which, for example, is 2, 3 for the time zone of the clock, is 3 for the date time, is 2, and many other many objects. The access selection parameters, as we said before, comes important when we want to call an object that the data in the buffer is different. For example, in the load profile, you want to have the last day data or the whole data buffer. And after you send it, if your structure is okay, the meter will respond in different packets or a single packet the data you want. And if your structure is wrong, the meter will respond with a wrong, for example, with an error, like, for example, wrong packet or wrong, for example, structure you set, different error types which is defined in the DLMS protocol. The set request is simply very similar to the get request, but the difference is in the response and the structure you send is a tiny difference. In the structure you send, after the attribute ID, you have to provide the value to be written to the object you want. And based on the object, the value and the format of the value is completely different. And you can just read them in the Green Book, and it has a very extensive knowledge in there. And the response is different from the GET request. In the GET request, you get the value, and you get the value by the structure of the value and blah, blah, blah. But in the SET request, you will only get success or failure, okay? Or either it has successfully written the data you want in the object, or it is failed. Okay, the action requests. It's literally very similar to the set request, but the difference is in the structure you send that contains the method ID instead of the attribute ID, and the method parameters instead of the value to be written. The response is nearly the same, that contains only success or failure for you to know that the action is executed or not. But you have to provide it with a method ID. For example, as we said earlier, if in the clock, if you want to set the clock to the nearest or closest quarter, you have to call, for example, method number 2 or 1. And this calls a function inside the meter and sets the clock to the closest quarter in the current hour, or goes to the next hour. Some of the functions in the DLMS Cosem contain special parameters, and they require special parameters. This is completely optional. It's not enforced, but some of the functions could have. It depends on the developer who has developed the meter or your DLMS Cosem device. And that is the action request, basics on the action request, and the whole thing about the requests in DLMS Cosem. And so thank you very much for following us on Mr. Meter. Please hit the subscribe button, and we'll be talking much more on network protocols, transmitting data models and modes, and all about applications of data measurement and transmission in energy grids and metering industry. Also, please feel free to send all your questions, and I will be making a video answering all of your questions, depending on how many questions are piled up. And sometimes I don't make videos. I just send back to you the response, the answer via email, and I will be happy to receive your emails and answer your questions. Thank you very much.